Just to clarify, Gaza is not a country. It is not an independent state, the same way that Israel is. It does not have its own fully functioning, fully independent government. It does not have its own military power, nor does it even have full control over its land. Gaza is an occupied territory in Israel. Israel has full control over what goes in and out of Gaza, who goes in and out of Gaza. They have full control over the borders. They have full control over the airspace, the water. They have control over Gaza's electricity, water, food supply, imports, exports, even medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Israel has control over it. Palestinians there do not have free movement in and out of Gaza. They have to obtain special permission from Israel just to leave and just to enter. Israel has had a full military blockade on Gaza since 2006, as in anything and everything surrounding Gaza, Israel has control over. That's why people refer to Gaza as the largest open-air prison in the world. It's literally a jail. It's a massive bubble that Palestinians have to live in based on however Israel wants them to live. If Israel wants to cut off electricity to Palestinians and only give them 3 hours of electricity a day, which they very often do, they have the freedom to do that because they have full control over Gaza. Israel doesn't even allow Gaza to have their own airport. They destroyed it in the early 2000s, and because Israel has control over the airspace, they can't rebuild one and just start flying out. Palestinians have to obtain permission from Israel to leave Gaza, and then if Israel grants them permission to leave Gaza, they have to take a bus from the border between Egypt and Gaza all the way to the airport in Egypt, and then they can fly out. Just think about that for a second. People in Gaza literally don't even have the right to have their own airport. That should give you a little bit of insight to what it's like living in Gaza under Israel's control. It's not like Israel is taking good care of these people in their land. No, they're treating them like subhuman. This is 2 million Palestinians living on a sliver of land that is 25 miles by 5 miles long. When Israel bombs Gaza and there are hundreds dead and thousands injured, they have control over what humanitarian aid enters Gaza. And more often than not, they actually prevent humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, whether from the waters or the border with Egypt. And this is literally happening right now. Israel is bombing Gaza, and Israel threatened Egypt, telling them to not send humanitarian aid to Gaza. The land mass of Gaza, or Gaza Strip, is a direct product of the settler colonial state of Israel. Before 1948, Israel did not exist. It belonged to Palestine. It was called Palestine. Britain, who was colonizing Palestine at that time, decided to establish this false state known as Israel on the land of Palestine and began ethnically cleansing Palestinians from the land, killing our people, and forcing more than 750,000 Palestinians to flee their land. And thus, the state of Israel was born. From then until now, the size of Palestinian land has been shrinking every single day. And what's left is Gaza Strip, this little piece of land, and the West Bank, which Israel also has full control over. Hamas is not Gaza's government. They are purely an administering power. The actual governing power of Gaza is Israel. Gaza doesn't have a military. The only form of protection the Palestinians there have is militant resistance groups like Hamas. They have nowhere near the military power that Israel has. Israel gets $3 billion of military aid from the US alone every single year. And that's just military aid. What does Gaza have? Literally nothing. It's ironic when Israel declares war with Gaza when they're two completely different powers. Even if Gaza wanted to start a military, they can't because Israel controls what goes in, and obviously they're not going to let them bring in weapons. So you are very, very wrong and misinformed if you think that Israel fighting with Gaza is a fair fight. Go read, watch any video on YouTube about how Gaza got to become what Gaza is right now. What's happening right now to Gaza is an ongoing issue. Israel bombs the bejesus out of Gaza and then suffocates them, preventing humanitarian aid and food and water from entering. This is nothing new. I literally recorded a podcast episode during the last Gaza attacks just this last May, giving a much more comprehensive breakdown of Gaza. So if you want to learn about it, Generic Muslim Podcast, Gaza attacks.
This is one of the most gruesome updates I've ever had to give, but the world needs to wake up and needs to see this. The bodies of 40 babies and toddlers were just found in just one of the communities that were slaughtered by Hamas.
It's not fair. Industry plants with bot followers and a checkmark get to lie about babies dying in order to make themselves feel better about bombing other kids that are a couple shades darker than them.
Babies and toddlers, children were targeted, and so were girls who were brutalized with mass rape.
You know, there's a reason why Fox is the only major network that's running with this story. Like, all the European stations tried to verify this. As in, they sent journalists, like people that have won awards, on the ground to go talk to the soldiers about the trauma of seeing unalive babies. And I shit you not, the government's response to all the news stations, how dare you ask us to verify this story? That's disrespectful to the dead and our soldiers. Like, I just take a step back. The irony of a government lying about another group of people doing something that they've been doing for the last decade, and then blaming this third group of people for it and bombing them, not even bombing the people that they're making up the story about. That's how ridiculous all of this is.
More than 150,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed or injured in Gaza and the West Bank since 2008. 33,000 of those were children. The EU stands by and watches this happen and calls Israel our friend. We construct houses and schools in the West Bank, the Israelis come and destroy them. We cannot consider ourselves a union of values and continue to call Israel our friend.
Like, who am I supposed to believe? The EU and the United Nations with their statistics, or some random Karen whose only claim to fame is being on the Bill Maher show regurgitating government talking points? Well, hold on. The way this all started 6 days ago, pure effing insanity. Hold on. This guy behind me is the current Israeli prime minister, but he also had the job in 1999 and nobody liked him. Somehow he got the job back in 2009 and started bombing the crap out of Palestinian kids, and nobody liked it. He had less than half of the country's approval rating. And then one day he gets a phone call from Egypt. They're like, hey, there's a terrorist attack coming on the anniversary of some shit. Why don't you go do your job as prime minister and protect your people? And Bibi turns into the snowflake god of all Karens, is like, oh, my people don't really like me. Maybe I'll just let a couple ravers die so I can look cool. And like, this isn't some bombshell journalism exposing some conspiracy. The defense prime minister tweeted it. Like all I did was Google Translate. Look, I'll do it for you. I'll give you the abridged version. Hey, Bibi, you're an a-hole for letting 250 people die at the hands of terrorists so you could go bomb this entirely different group of people that had nothing to do with the attack. You should resign.
Coming from Hamas's armed wing, a spokesman there has warned residents in Ashkelon, that is a town inside Israel, that they have until 5 p.m. today to leave. So Hamas have issued a warning on the television.
Nobody is defending Hamas or terrorists on this page, by the way. They're brutal people using tactics meant to instill fear. But there are three sides to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. You got the terrorist side, for whatever reason, decide to warn the civilians in Ashkelon. Then you got the Palestinians, and forget the whole apartheid state. They are currently getting bombed for something that the terrorists did, right? And then you got us, the Western governments, telling these people, hey, this is the evacuation route to Egypt, and then letting Israel bomb the evacuation route 3 times. Like, it's really hard to figure out who's the good guy in this situation. No, wait, I don't think you heard me. Like, you see these links? This is like the New York Times for Israel. Even the Jewish people are like, yeah, that's kind of fucked up that you told all the Palestinians not responsible for the terrorist attacks to pack up all their shit in suitcases and go evacuate in this one route. And then you bomb the route. Like, you bomb them as they're trying to leave the country. Like, I just, what